Meme review. Meme review. Oh wait, that's PewDiePie's thing. No, my mistake. Okay, play the intro. In the years before the First World War, the rise of new and improved military technology changed the ways that countries interacted by prompting the creation of more effective tools to wage war with, pushing diplomatic relations to the max, and starting wars that helped to burn the wire for a truly global conflict. That conflict being the First World War or the Great War, whichever you prefer. World War I is considered to be the birth of modern warfare. Machine guns, airplanes, tanks, things that we see as standard today were not so standard back then. With advancements in military technology, smaller countries had the power to invade much larger but less advanced nations, and this is shown best by the British Empire, who conquered much of Africa and held territory in North America. These acts of imperialism was based on one aspect of a country, its military. With the British, their conquest granted them access to a myriad of resources that they used to make their military the largest in the world for over 4 centuries. The most common weapon in a military is the gun, which is not so ancient as you might think. The first functional firearm that had a trigger mechanism and was light enough to be carried by one man wasn't invented until the 1400s. These firearms used a mechanical system called a matchlock, the first of its kind, to fire the weapon, with both hands still holding the weapon. Earlier firearms required the soldier to light the powder with one of his hands, which left one hand to hold the gun, decreasing accuracy. This was the standard design for rifles and pistols for a time. The matchlock gave soldiers an overwhelming advantage over others in terms of firepower, giving the empires the edge they needed to conquer new lands. But the matchlock had a few downsides. First, the gun would have to be reloaded after every shot, and it was loud, which caused some soldiers to go deaf just from the noise, and its recoil was very hard. But, compared to the crossbows and heavier firearms, the matchlock reigned supreme. The Ottoman Turks became the leaders of this new way of warfare, and the effects of such an advantage was shown when the Turks conquered the city of Constantinople in 1453, with the heavily defended city falling in a matter of days, due to the bombardment of Ottoman artillery and riflemen. The fall of Constantinople encouraged other empires to implement matchlock weapons into their militaries, changing the way of warfare forever. An even more improved version of the matchlock came in 1630 with the invention of the flintlock, which simplified the process. The flintlock reigned as the dominant firearm for the next 2 centuries until 1860, when the Spencer repeating rifle was patented in the United States. The Spencer immediately became revolutionary, as it was the first rifle ever produced that was able to fire more than one shot without reloading. The first firearm ever made that can fire more than one shot was the first Colt revolver 25 years earlier in 1835. I'm sure you all know how a revolver works, so let's move back to the Spencer. The Spencer used a lever action system, meaning that after each shot, a lever on the bottom of the weapon was moved up and down to load a new round in. The process was finished with the shooter priming the hammer on top of the gun and pulling the trigger to fire. The gun held 7 shots in an internal magazine located in the stock, but the real reason why the Spencer was so successful, and what was arguably more revolutionary, was the implementation of the new full rimfire cartridge, which allowed for smaller but equally powerful ammunition to be used in firearms. This allowed for a new age of firearms to be produced. Some famous lever-action rifles produced are the Winchester 1873 and 1894, the Spencer carbine, and the Savage Model 99. Lever-action rifles were the primary choice of weapon for militaries around the world in the mid to late 1800s, as they beat muskets and breech-loading rifles in most categories. But a new weapon designed would give the firepower of 100 riflemen to a single machine gunner. This weapon was the Gatling Gun, which was widely considered the predecessor to the modern machine gun. The Gatling gun was invented by Richard Gatling in 1861 and first saw service in the American Civil War by Union soldiers, but it was not the kind of machine gun that you would think. It was human-powered and was operated by a gunner who turned a crank on the side of the weapon to fire, and it looked something like this. The Gatling gun gave the Union an advantage over the Confederacy, as just one man can take out hundreds of soldiers all on his own, and the Confederacy had no such weapon to meet this. And with the use of lever-action rifles, the Union pushed the Confederates back into submission, and by 1865, the American Civil War was over and the Union was restored.
Victory is mine!
The Gatling success sparked the idea of investing more in automatic machine guns, and in 1884, Hiram Maxim invented the Maxim machine gun, the world's first true automatic weapon. The Maxim used the weapon's recoil to move the bolt and chamber a new round, which meant no crank like on the Gatling. The Maxim was so successful, in fact, that it was called the weapon most associated with the British imperial conquest. With the Maxim, the British Empire grew exponentially, and it made Britain the richest and most powerful nation in the world because of it. With the Maxim, the British pushed further into Africa, gaining more land and resources to grow their military with. The Maxim was so successful that many clones were produced by different countries, which include, but not limited to, the Vickers machine gun, the German Maschinengewehr 08 and 08-15, and the American M1917 Browning machine gun. The creation of recoil-operated firearms allowed for the creation of many new automatic and self-loading rifles, or in today's terms, semi-automatic. But let's step back a bit to look at the most recognizable rifle type from the late 19th to the mid-20th century, the bolt-action rifle. With the success of lever-action rifles, they were considered the best firearm to arm a military with, but there were some downsides. Most noticeably, they can only fire pistol ammunition such as .45 caliber, which both limited their damage potential and range. A bolt-action rifle, first invented in 1824 by Johann Nicholas von Dreyse, used larger rifle rounds, which increased range, accuracy, and power. Because of this, bolt-action rifles soundly replaced the lever-action as the standard-issue firearm for countries around the world. Bolt action is also one more advantage over lever action. They could be reloaded much more quickly with the use of stripper clips that allowed an experienced rifleman to load all 5 rounds in just 2 seconds, a lot faster than the 10-second average reload time of lever action. Some of the most famous bolt-action rifles include the American Springfield model of 1903, the British short magazine Leonfield, which used box magazines, making reloading even easier than stripper clips, the German Gewehr 98, the Russian Mosin-Nagant M1891, and the Japanese Type 38 Arisaka. With the topic of rifles, in 1900, John Moses Browning designed the world's first self-loading rifle, the Remington Model 8, which also used recoil to chamber a new round. These new innovations allowed for the creation of a semi-automatic pistol, the first commercially successful of which being the magazine-fed Borchardt C93. Some famous semi-auto pistols include the German C96 Broomhandle and Luger P08, the Browning High Power, and the legendary Colt M1911, with all of these pistols looking good in the hands of an officer, especially the Luger in 1911, in my opinion. Modern firearms have had over 500 years worth of development, but naval warships have had over 5,000 years worth of development. The first galleys were long and narrow warships which were human-powered and were used to ram other warships to sink them. This tactic stayed relatively the same until the Age of Sail in the 16th century, with massive ships of the line battling with pirates and troubled colonists. The first modern warship and the turning point of naval warfare was the French ironclad Glory, launched in 1859. Glory became the first ironclad warship ever made, and her and the British HMS Warrior had hulls made from steel and were powered by steam, which made all other wooden warships obsolete instantly. Possibly the greatest example of an ironclad's effectiveness was at the Battle of Hampton Roads during the American Civil War, in which 2 ironclads, the USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia, slugged each other out for hours without either doing any major damage to each other. The Battle of Hampton Roads showed the effectiveness of an all-steel hull, and with advancements in ship design in the 1870s, an even new type of ship arose, the pre-dreadnought battleship. The most defining part of a pre-dreadnought was the inclusion of heavy artillery and barbettes that can outrange anything that an ironclad had. The artillery were located in turrets that could rotate around a fixed point compared to an ironclad's fixed cannons. The pre-dreadnought's effectiveness was shown at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905 during the Russo-Japanese War, where the fleets of the Japanese and Russian navies clashed in one of the largest naval battles in history. It is at this battle that Japan showed the world that they were a major power as they sunk 21 Russian ships, with many others being damaged or captured. The Battle of Tsushima was the final victory for the Japanese in the Russo-Japanese War, and the war was over by September 1905, with Japan fully annexing Korea and building their empire and military large enough to challenge the West. All of this would change, however, in 1906 as one massive ship slid down the gangway, a ship that would change naval warfare forever. HMS Dreadnought, the world's first all-big gun battleship. Being more heavily armed, armored, and faster than any ship before it, Dreadnought made any other naval ship obsolete, and it showed the world that the British aren't messing around. The launch and success of Dreadnought sparked a naval arms race between Britain and Germany to see who could create the larger and more powerful Dreadnought. FYI, Dreadnought was the name of this type of ship before battleship became the standard name. The Germans launched their first Dreadnought in 1908, the SMS Nassau. Despite exceptional German engineering, Nassau was much less of a success than its British counterpart. Its main armament was 12 11-inch naval cannons, while Dreadnought had 10 12-inch guns, and their maneuverability was poor even in calm seas, with their motion being quite stiff compared to the British ships. Nevertheless, Germany and Britain created massive fleets of dreadnoughts due to the ongoing naval arms race, which ended in 1912, with Britain having 29 and Germany having only 17. The race tore up Britain and Germany's mostly friendly relationship with each other, and by 1914, the two countries saw each other as enemies. The United States during this time also built multiple dreadnoughts, their first being the USS South Carolina, completed in 1908, building up their navy to a point which they can challenge most European navies. And this is sadly the last major advancement of military technology before World War I. I would talk about airplanes and submarines, but we are a little pressed for time at the moment, so we'll have to leave that for later. In all, the Anglo-German naval arms race, as it is known as today, is widely considered to be one of the main causes of the First World War just due to the strength the two countries' relationships went through, due to the competition of building bigger, better war machines. Actually, there were hundreds of reasons that sparked the beginning of World War I, but one that was most influential was the advancement of military technology, as with these new deadlier tools of war, empires rose and fell, and the modern age opened up to the world. World War I could be described as children at a playground fighting each other with their new toys. And that's the end of this. I would like to thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed.